In 1805, an enslaved man named Charles Ball refused to pick his cotton quota. His punishment? He was stripped naked, tied to a post, and whipped until his back was shredded. Then, his wounds were washed with salt brine that burned so intensely he nearly lost consciousness. This wasn't an isolated incident of cruelty. It was standard practice on American cotton plantations. Behind the wealth of the cotton industry that built America's economy lay a systematic torture regime. So calculated that plantation owners called it the pushing system, a method that transformed human beings into cotton-producing machines through calculated violence. Welcome to the infamous past, where we reveal the most horrific torture methods used to maximize cotton production. Methods so effective they increased productivity by 400% in just decades. The truth can be unsettling. Subscribe to witness history as it really was. American cotton industry. The American cotton industry of the 19th century represented one of history's most profitable enterprises. By 1860, cotton accounted for 60% of American exports, with enslaved people producing nearly 2 billion pounds annually. This economic miracle wasn't achieved through technological innovation alone. It was built on a foundation of systematic torture designed to extract maximum labor from enslaved bodies. What made this system particularly disturbing wasn't just its brutality, but its calculated efficiency. Plantation owners and overseers developed torture methods specifically calibrated to maximize cotton production while keeping enslaved people alive enough to continue working. They shared these techniques through agricultural journals and correspondence, creating a science of human suffering. The whipping system. The foundation of cotton plantation discipline was the whip, not just as a tool of punishment, but as the central technology of the entire cotton production system. Unlike the simple leather whips used in earlier periods, plantation whips were specialized instruments designed for maximum pain with minimal permanent damage. The most common was the cotton whip, a short wooden handle attached to a long, flexible leather strip that tapered to a point. Some had multiple tails, allowing for several lashes with a single stroke. These weren't crude implements but carefully crafted tools. Some plantation owners even took pride in their whips' craftsmanship, displaying them prominently as symbols of their authority. What made whipping on cotton plantations particularly brutal was its systematic nature. Each plantation had a specific whipping protocol. Solomon Northup, who was enslaved on a cotton plantation, described the process. The whip was given to one of the slaves who was compelled to inflict the punishment. 20 lashes was the penalty for every 5 pounds of cotton that was lacking. This mathematical precision transformed whipping from random cruelty into a calculated system. Enslaved people knew exactly how many lashes they would receive for missing their quota, creating a psychological torture of anticipation that accompanied the physical pain. The technique itself was designed to maximize suffering while preserving the victim's ability to work. Enslaved people were typically stripped naked and tied to a post or tree. The whip was applied in a specific pattern across the back, buttocks, and thighs, areas that could be severely damaged without preventing field work the following day. After whipping, salt brine was often applied to the wounds. While overseers claimed this prevented infection, survivors' accounts reveal its true purpose was to intensify pain. Charles Ball, who experienced this treatment in 1805, described it as more painful than the whipping itself, like fire poured into the wounds. This calculated approach to whipping reveals how plantation owners viewed enslaved bodies not as human beings, but as machines to be calibrated through pain. As historian Edward Baptist notes, the whip was as important to making cotton grow as sunshine and rain. The pushing system. Beyond individual punishments, plantation owners developed what they called the pushing system, a comprehensive method of torture designed to continuously increase cotton productivity. This system combined physical violence with psychological manipulation to extract ever greater output from enslaved workers. At the heart of the pushing system was the cotton quota. Each enslaved person was assigned a daily picking minimum that increased over time. In 1800, the average daily quota was 50 pounds of cotton per worker. By 1860, some plantations demanded 200 to 300 pounds daily, an impossible target that ensured regular punishment. Israel Campbell, enslaved on a Mississippi plantation, described how this system worked. Belfer, the plantation owner, had told me that my daily minimum was 100 pounds and that I would have as many lashes as there were pounds short. When Campbell picked only 90 pounds, he received 10 lashes. The pushing system used accounting techniques borrowed from the business world. Overseers kept detailed ledgers recording each person's daily cotton weight. These records weren't just for plantation management. They were publicly displayed to create competition and shame among the enslaved workforce. A Natchez doctor described the evening weighing ritual. The overseer meets all hands at the scales, with the lamp, scales, and whip. Each basket is carefully weighed, and the net weight of cotton set down upon the slate, opposite the name of the picker. "So many pounds short," cries the overseer, and takes up his whip. This combination of precise record-keeping and public humiliation created a psychological torture that accompanied the physical pain. Enslaved people lived in constant anxiety about meeting their quotas, knowing that failure meant certain punishment. What made the pushing system particularly effective was how it forced enslaved people to internalize their own oppression. To avoid punishment, they had to continuously push themselves beyond normal human endurance. As one former slave recalled, "You worked yourself to death to keep from being beaten to death." Torture devices. Beyond whipping, plantation owners employed specialized torture devices designed to control enslaved people while allowing them to continue working in the cotton fields. One of the most common was the iron collar, a heavy metal ring locked around the neck, often with protruding spikes or bells attached. These collars weighed up to 15 pounds and were typically worn for months at a time. The spikes prevented the wearer from lying down to sleep, while bells made escape impossible by announcing every movement. Henry Bibb, who escaped slavery in Kentucky, described his experience wearing such a collar. "It caused my neck to become raw and sore, the weight of the iron pressing my shoulders down, the prongs tearing my flesh as I turned over at night." Another widespread device was the cotton screw, a mechanism originally designed for compressing cotton bales that was repurposed as a torture device. Enslaved people would be placed between the metal plates of the screw, which would then be tightened to the point of excruciating pain without crushing bones. In one documented case from Alabama, an enslaved man named James was placed in a cotton screw for 4 days after attempting escape. When the press was finally opened, he had died from dehydration and internal injuries. His body showed evidence that rats had begun eating him while he was still alive. Perhaps most psychologically devastating were the speculum oris and mouth pair, metal devices forced into the mouths of enslaved people to prevent them from speaking, eating, or drinking. These were often used on those caught teaching others to read or organizing resistance. The devices could be left in place for days, causing severe dehydration, mouth injuries, and psychological trauma. These specialized torture devices reveal how plantation owners approach the control of enslaved people as a technical problem to be solved through innovation. They continuously developed new technologies of pain, specifically calibrated to break resistance while preserving labor capacity. Sexual torture. Among the most devastating aspects of plantation torture was the systematic sexual violence inflicted on enslaved women. This wasn't just a byproduct of power imbalance. It was an institutionalized practice that served both economic and psychological purposes in maintaining the plantation system. Enslaved women faced sexual exploitation that was inextricably linked to cotton production. Those who failed to meet cotton quotas were often subjected to sexual assault as punishment. As one survivor testified in the WPA slave narratives, if you didn't pick fast enough, the overseer would strip you naked, tie you to a post, and then do what he wanted with you before whipping you. Beyond punishment, sexual violence served as a form of reproductive control. Plantation owners viewed enslaved women's fertility as an economic asset. Each child born into slavery represented additional property. Some plantations had designated breeding women who were exempt from field work but subjected to forced reproduction. Lu Li, a formerly enslaved woman, described how women attempted to resist this reproductive exploitation. Women unfixed themselves by taking calomel and turpentine. 10 or 12 drops would miscarry you. But the makers found what it was used for, and they changed the way of making turpentine. Women who resisted sexual exploitation faced specialized tortures. Some had their breasts whipped or burned. Others were subjected to genital mutilation. Pregnant women who attempted escape or resistance were often punished by being tied face down on the ground with a hole dug for their belly, allowing them to be whipped without damaging their unborn child, who represented future property. The psychological impact of this sexual torture extended beyond the immediate victims. Husbands and fathers were often forced to witness the assault of their wives and daughters, creating a form of psychological torture that undermined family bonds and reinforced powerlessness. This systematic sexual violence wasn't hidden or denied. It was an acknowledged part of the plantation system. As Mary Boykin Chestnut, a plantation owner's wife, wrote in her diary, "Like the patriarchs of old, our men live all in one house with their wives and their concubines." The cost of cotton. The torture methods used on cotton plantations weren't just expressions of individual cruelty. They were systematized practices designed to maximize production through calculated suffering. What makes this history particularly disturbing is how it reveals the relationship between American economic prosperity and systematic torture. The cotton produced through this system of violence didn't just enrich Southern plantation owners. It supplied the textile mills of New England and Britain, creating wealth that built cities, universities, and financial institutions that still exist today. The productivity increases achieved through these torture methods were staggering. Between 1800 and 1860, the amount of cotton picked per enslaved worker increased by 400%. This wasn't achieved through technological innovation, but through the systematic application of torture, refined and perfected over decades. As we reflect on this dark chapter of American history, we must confront uncomfortable questions about the foundations of our economic system. How much of America's early economic advantage was built on these systematic torture methods? The torture methods of cotton plantations may seem distant history, but their legacy continues to shape our world in ways we're only beginning to understand. By confronting this difficult past honestly, we take the first step toward building a more just future. What other aspects of slavery's economic impact should we explore in future videos? Let us know in the comments below. And if you found this examination of history's darkest chapters valuable, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the hidden stories that shaped our world.